Okay, so then say, so I use the metaphor of having, it's like we're on the surface of a pond, and then say the system changed, and the specificity that this was in reference to is something about the overt targeting of individuals due to their knowledge of the system, basically, that the red flags come up as one realizes what's going on. Kind of an extension from aspects of previous conversation in the simplest terms of basically esoteric exposal did a quote post that kind of sums it up. It actually wasn't a quote, but that if you won't survive if you don't know how to pretend you don't know what's going on, or you don't know how to act like you don't know what's going on. And that's probably the name of the game in all situations in terms of hiding your hand, or covering your hand, if you will. But in terms of this like informational control system, the fact of just targeting and so on, and maybe, and I was trying to convey the point that maybe we're kind of past this as a civilization for whatever reason, in logistical terms, or the time of awakening. I don't know, to the point where it's maybe a designation from the inside, or it's something kind of forcing the whole system to correspond with something higher, and that's just how it is. Regardless, it seems that there's some type of general trend related to that, or at the very least, the exposure of information, and in that way, truth that leads to knowledge of what's going on. And so maybe that's just required as part of the process by the people who want to cover their own behinds, but regardless, that's still what's happening. And it hasn't been any easier, like I said in the other conversation, anyway, because all we have beyond that is the illusion of choice and security and privacy and all these things. And we already have that, but until we realize it in a certain way, we also have the illusion with that. And so it's kind of like we have this process of separating from the illusion. However that's going to play out. And so then the concept there is that maybe, like ripples on a pond, those on the outer manifestations of this reality and the society or the control system, or the at a further lesser proximity to the core, the source of the change, the events and occurrences happening that decide the outcome of this reality, based upon maybe the system changing all around, because information's been hidden and so on in the simplest sense, and now it's being either let out or brought out, or has to be done in that way. And in that same sense, it's kind of like the last trick to try and muddy the waters to the point where it'll never get understood properly. But the idea then is that, in as well, maybe these events, being in close proximity to them, doesn't mean you're in Congress, you're in DC, or France, or England, one of these locations with a lot of power. Maybe it means your dreams and your daily occurrences, you're the subjects of your mind, are occurring within a kind of informational sphere that deals with the concepts and the experiences within that really determine what's happening here, are the foundation of this reality, and are in a sense a kind of hyperdimensional, not room people are meeting up in, but a larger universe where things are getting done, things are getting changed, and has been essentially, for our human domain, ruled over by gatekeepers who, in their counterparts on this plane, we had no access to the knowledge, at least on a mass scale. Maybe it doesn't make sense because we still don't, nothing changed, but people are slowly turning on. And in that sense, it's kind of like, well, then nobody's letting the knowledge out. They just, what are they going to do? The carpet's slipping out from under them. They got to walk off it. You can't ride it like that. It's not going to work. And maybe it's all a show. Maybe they're doing it and so on. Or maybe they're just pretending like they're doing it, and they pretend like they do everything in terms of maybe these controlling, manipulative forces, not like, just everybody involved in these programs or so on. And at that point, they could get lined up to be pushed off a cliff, and they'll all be like, yes, this is what we want, do this is all part of the plan, even though it's obviously their demise. Not saying that that's what's supposed to happen, or that would even be a demise, because when you factor in cloning, that really doesn't mean anything. But the idea then is that proximity, that temporal field, that membrane is not the surface of a pond in a location proximally to this place, but a frequency within everyone, whether they're getting the truth of this reality or shutting it out primarily. And so then those operating in those frequencies control this reality, and for the longest time, it was probably primarily within certain control groups. And as well, those then maybe always knowing the truth or having to do with that, being in close proximity, could see the small details in this society that represent an unknown amount of change and variation. How do you break down how many facets of society there are? How many rays of sun and angles of reflections you see when you walk through a street in the day? It's complex. But there's a subtle understanding of what's going on, the trends, the signs, if you want to look at it like that, without this heavy look into the occult and mysticism. It's simple awareness of something changing, what's going on, and in that sense, us potentially being past it. The idea is that the metaphor of the ripples being of a kind of quantum time space where it's our civilization, but in ring format, in an ultra super fluid, a hyperfluid liquid that's a mix between a gas, a liquid, and a plasma, and it's complex yet programmable to the point where it holds information, and it represents our collective noosphere. And in that sense, in the center, that is where changes occur, and the event took place, whatever it was that manifested a change in this overt power control structure that we call reality in society. By the time the guy on the street over there at the bar figures that out, it's long in the past. It happened long ago, if you will. Some people don't realize that things happened 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, that changed everything. More, 3,000, 30,000, 100,000, up into the millions, but then you're pushing it into these hyper-projected realities, which go into these upper dimensional planes that one has to use mind and spirit to access, to the point where it technically didn't happen to anybody, but it happened to all of us simultaneously as essence. And that's where the origin of myth comes from, that not in far enough time weird things happen and things were different, but that when you go right outside the plane, you get all these parallels and possibilities that are coinciding. And that's always eternally right there. Like we're in an orb or whatever with I forgot the camera's rolling, with kind of like the way they image a black hole with like peaks on either end. And you go that way far enough, you get past that hyperbolic barrier, you get into quantum space. You go that way, it's the same thing. We're surrounded by quantum space, kind of like a ball rolling through the field. We feel like there's a field that way that we rolled through, and there's a path up there that we're rolling towards. It's not, it's creating it as it goes. And when you jump to a different frequency, it's versions of that. But there's only a core, and that's kind of neither here nor there in that sense. And the idea is mainly that the guy that's informationally out on a branch of a subculture of a nation-based consciousness, indoctrinated from birth. Basically, there's branches. There's circles in the same sense, and there's a core of what we are as people and what's going on. And when you know the truth about who's deciding who's doing what and what's happening in your life and who's doing what behind it. When people are unaware and they're asleep, it means they're the tools, the brainchild of the programmers that put those indoctrinations in the system. So throughout their life, if they're real people, which, neither here nor there, the idea is that they'd have to first understand who they are, who they're living as, is not who they think they are, and who they really are is abstract from both of those, and that like that simple concept that they're not really in control, and then from there unveiling how that's possible, and then from there how brains operate and how consciousness works, and be aware of their own thoughts in that sense. Basically a kind of analysis and not a breakdown, but an analysis, observation, and then a feedback response with themselves. Eventually they'll get a taste of what they're doing, and it causes a realization. But and so then the idea, though, is the person deep within that system, it's as if you went down a ladder, then went across to another thing, went down a ladder. And it's not the fact that they can't get out, because the magic thing is you can go and just jump to the top. You don't have to do anything. Or you can go to the bottom, but if you do that so many times, you just go to the bottom and jump back up. There's no point in being at the bottom. It's like fallacious. Fallacious? No, that's a bad word. Fallacious? So what's it called? But then at the same sense, you could do that and see people just dead frightened at that bottom just because they don't realize how it works. And so there's always a reason. But the idea there is that information, water pouring down the sewer ladderways going through the tunnels, we'll reach him after like 8 or 9 levels. It'll literally be back in time. If it's off a projection field to if the amount of information they're generating now accelerates through the 1800s and 1900s, 1960, 1930, to the point where now before it even hits the bottom, they have a whole new world of information being pulsed out, and you have multiple ripples in scene. It gets to the point now where the individuals that are at the top change things, and it happens so fast that by the time it hits the individual at the bottom, the world that information will be relative to will be already gone, and it'll be a whole new system replacing it. But that will happen then before that happens. A whole new world will, before the realization that that world's behind, another one will be, it'll get to the point where it's streaming out. If it's ripples, one every 1,000 years, and down to 100 years is every one, and it's like every generation is going to a new world, to the point where as soon as it's happening, the quarters of generations, it gets to the point where it's just beaming out, and the only people left there that didn't turn to fractal skeletons, like, you know, in Indiana Jones with the time waves shooting out, are those who are able to ride those waves, ride that ripple, and understand what's happening in the truth in a quantum sense before they get there. It doesn't really make any sense, but there's systems designed like that, and this is one large version of that I've come to realize. And because the same thing happening, it's a wave pool of time, and it's just very slow. And it might be very slow because somebody stuck weights on the outside to block everything up, and now everybody's like, oh man, it's all blocked up and stuck up, when if they took them off, it would just spin cycle everybody into oblivion. But it's still, then if it heats up and now it's going to let go and slingshot us, that's the point. The step stair figure we have, I think I spoke about that a little bit. Do you want to go up a gradual winding slope, or do you want to jump up steps? And then, you know, maybe if they have systems, I did record a little bit about this. I haven't put all those recordings out there. I hate listening to my own voice, so it takes time. And maybe if I find an editor that can just edit out all the pauses and mispronounced words and things. But you know, then maybe if there are operations that are witnessing these possibilities, creating training scenarios or sims of having people learn how to jump up the stairs of time, could assist in those. Now that we have mind and machine technology, that say a collapse happened or a quantum event, or we hit an acceleration point because somebody creates a great attractor at the beginning of middle of their civilization verse, which is intersecting in the middle of ours, and if we don't figure out how we're walking, we're just going to be like jumping between suns, if you will, and etherically. And so maybe in that case, in a poop hit the fan scenario, they could use that technology, that information, the knowledge gained from those situations to ensure survival of the species, literally in a quantum sense, which is also kind of paradoxical or nonsensical, because you can't go anywhere in a quantum sense. But if some people stay alive and some people kind of, if a species branches, it will take off of certain things. Here's another, we're getting strange ideas. Another one, say you go take a loop and you loop around a light and a guy with his dog, and you're on the bike or something, and you go back. I mean, in space, it doesn't matter, but say you're doing that in time. If you need to close that loop out and remove whatever is anchoring it there, and there's somebody existing in that loop with no way out, it kills them when you do that. So events have to be organized in certain ways that it kind of outlines what you don't want to happen, so to speak. And then, obviously, it brings up the question of whether we're in one of those now, or we've tangled ourselves in one, or that kind of happened by way of messing around with quantum entanglement systems and making gateways to universes, and those entangling in this place in a way that's paradoxical, which threatens the stability of everything, especially if we're quantum, you know, beings, to the degree where the part of us that continues on is a quantum essence that rides the waves of not time, but possibility throughout. Time is according to a resource. Energy goes down, time goes up. So it's like the quantum essence is, do you have enough creativity to continue coming up with possibilities and new resources to turn into realities that you could then, you know, effortlessly energy, like unlimited energy, but it's not unlimited energy, it's simply recycling energy, if you will. It's like a perpetual system. I talked about that with a slice of pi in time that if it all buzzes out and the light turns off, it might just disappear and another one slides out in its place. Like, it's just continual infinite, or virtually infinite, to the point where there's more energy supporting it than there is inside to get out. And so, but then that's where you bend time, and you make these gateways and paradoxes to get out and potentially trap everybody in something that's created. That was a previous talk. That was before the other one, which I need to put out. I'll just put them out. I don't want to. There's a lot of work in slideshows. There's only 15 minutes. That's the idea. So that it's. But the point is then. So if it's coming from the center and it's no longer like, oh, change, and it's shifting and it changes you as you realize it, and it's slowly but it's literally like ripples, throwing people off their sense of self in reality, or merging it with other information until it would look like, logistically, if you had to diagram the situation, and first you're like, all right, so here's time, we think it's this, but it's really like an orb thing with tails going on either end. It would look like the tails were squeezing in on us and collapsing. We were losing variability of the possibilities of resources, creativity, quantum consciousness stability in the situation, or we were moving into a smaller and smaller proximal field of stability for time. But that would be because of these, it's just expanding. The faster it goes, the shorter the moment seems, to the point where a day could fly by in a second because it's happening so fast. There are so many things compressing. So it could make a millennia seem like, a few years without people realizing it. The people on the outside will seemingly merge with that effervescent temporal field that is all and everything, and it would be like their consciousness would be unstable, like they would be merging with like antimatter and matter, if you will, slowly. It would just be canceling out, which could be, apparently is a situation, I'm sorry I'm rambling now, but apparently it was the situation that got us here, where we don't have the full civilization, the full genetic structure. It's like people are dormant, if you will, which is whether you want to believe they invented death or so on and so forth, or however that works. There's 5 different ways I can describe how to do it. What's it called? From a immortalized state without physical bearings, basically a hyper reality, or anyway. And so then the solution is that if time is increasing and the rate of information coming from the center is rippling faster and faster until it's no longer ripples but a standing field of vibrations, of frequency coming out, is that we're all in our own quantum temporal fields. We're no longer on Earth. We're all shooting through quantum space. And we all have to be able to take in this jet stream of quantum information being shot at us, beamed at us, stop it, freeze frame it, break it down into its component signals, organize it so it streamlines around us, and push it out that way, like we're in our own thought-based UFO system of self-awareness, a containment bubble, so that it doesn't get distorted, and it's a barrel now that can ride the rapids, if you will, which is still chunky and not what anybody would want to do, but like it's rudimentary in the sense of holding together. Once enough people get together doing that, you have a bubble in space-time that holds itself together. But somebody turn on the rapids in the wave pool, and it's probably just to get more energy into the system, and that's the result, if you will. But what they need energy for and so on, well, we'll find out if they really bounce the planet through quantum space into another dimension by altering signals, with HARP, by altering signals in the collective brains of everyone to get it like the dials of a time machine or something, creating ripples of artificial memories and so on. But the idea, and which would then be as if webs of different containment fields merged over and overlapped simultaneously at some point. Like somebody cut out a certain part of it and just folded it together real quick. Or it was just jumped, and then we have those with the residual of the previous, which then brings up a conundrum of who's who, because if some people remember, then what does that indicate? And there's always extra versions because it has to be that way, because it's probably happening equally in different dimensions. It's these different scenarios that play out differently for different civilizations and timelines. But the idea is that we all become... So it's like we're not powered. We're sailboats. There's no wind, or the wind ravaged the sails, or they just don't have them. Or really somebody froze all the wind, so there's like no wind. And then somebody turned the rapids on. We have to convert that to... An outboard motor sounds bad because that sounds like it's like a technical thing that's put in. We have to begin to power. Whether we kick our legs or there's oars out the side, we're canoes, put it that way. And we have to power the vessels ourselves, because... not only do we probably not want to get swept downstream that way, but we actually have to go upstream. And in that sense, really all you have to do there, for the most part, is not get blown away by time. Um, and so to understand that, imagine how the guy down at the bar for the past 2,000 years didn't pay attention to shit. And, they invented, I don't know, farming, agriculture for certain foods that he eats and changed his genetics and so on and so forth. And he's a product of a reality he has nothing, no knowledge about. The result of being 8 layers deep in divergence from that central field is that when that truth comes out, it'll probably have no chance. He'll probably have no chance to understand it. It could possibly destroy him. And either now, or if he knew the truth now, he'd probably be in suffering. That's the result. And that's the idea of now there's 2 worlds that he's behind. It means that he's probably never going to get it, because it's going to look horrifying. It's not even going to look like a next world of information. It's going to look like some crazy shit that he doesn't even know how to make sense of. And so then that's where that situation comes in, because it's almost as if the whole world is in that situation. But therein lies the difference. Some people you tell this to, they're like, I knew something wasn't right. I seen some shit before. It went like blah, blah, blah. And then other people are just like, the truth with the other people, they're either edited or they're not overcoming it, because the program that goes down and says, that didn't happen, don't believe that, don't look at that, don't think about that anymore. It happens to all of us. Only they believe it and stay with it, because we've all seen things, it always happens. Something always happens that clues you into what's going on. And they either just can't pay attention to it or whatever it is, but it's mainly just that moment. You get like 2 days of either you're going to think about something in this way or in a new way that's going to change your life forever, or you're not, and you're going to forget it. And the act of forgetting it and choosing to forget it in that state is going to change your life forever. And so that's what happens. Here's another weird thought. Okay, so the soul changed, and then the other one was, so then I can't remember where that came from, but it's been on my mind. There was a whole workup for it. I mean, I'm pretty much done with that, but the time field and how it works and how it got to that, and basically just the idea that that's what's happening. It's almost like it's just accelerating to the point where we have to learn to calibrate it. It's basically, it accelerates off the chart. So here's the other aspect. So it's as if that guy 8 layers back has no possible chance, right? Because he's 8 worlds of information and lives of having to learn in generation by generation in however much time he's got left in order to know the truth, and therefore know himself here in this universe, this life here, know what's going on, and not be a tool of some system. So the idea is they made it that way for everybody. Instead of being like, oh, we screwed it up, all these souls are going to be lost because it's just too difficult for some, they said, all right, either everyone's going to lose or we're all going to make it, because it's really not that hard, it's perception. And so then it's impossible to walk your way up 8 layers of information and worlds. The only solution, because what we're doing is riding the wave. The new solution is no longer moving in a linear format and essentially learning to teleport yourself to the core of where you're supposed to be. And it's in that sense that we're skipping the process of, if you will, taking step-by-step bounces to it. And it's one of those gradual curves, but it's going to be an exponential curve, which means your information times your information times your information, a certain number of times. You only have to do it at certain times, and everything turns into an exponential curve. If you do it in linear function with each number times itself, I can't remember, like 7 or 9 or something like that, and then it goes exponential, where it moves out of the proportions. It gets disproportionately numerically astronomical, meaning our ability to perceive becomes less and less rational or relevant as it goes on, to the point where it's like a paradox. The curve itself is a paradox. That's the symbol in everything pointy and twisted. Just the meaning behind it. And then, but the idea is then, so it's like we're skipping all the bases and going straight to home. That kind of gives the idea, but it's a physical, biophysical, really a consciousness based, but it's physically because it's energetically, can be sensed in this dimension. Physically, you can see it. You can get plasmas to do this. You can get information to do it. You can see this thing, but what happens is within, because like your consciousness doesn't. But in that sense, it made it so that all of time is being compressed. All in that curve, all of the information of all the universes and all the mistakes and the healings and everything, the true way that it comes out, and to make a true person, if you will, is every single individual is going to face it. And now it's just about who. So nobody can say they didn't get the chance, they didn't do it, or whatever it is, that it didn't happen to them. Everybody's going to get it, but it's just about apparently the few will make it. But the idea is then it's instead of making it one size fits all, and it's hard because some lost, but it wasn't hard enough that those who survived everything. They made it the max possible advance that it could be in as well. It just happened. Invention after world-altering change that was hidden and pushed people back to the point where it's like before I said it, a rubber band, to where it's now 2 civilizations worth of difference, and we're moving out of the window where now the rubber band's going to break, and if you try and accelerate people through all that time and there's any more of a gap, it'll kill them. That's the concept in human terms, that it will fry their brain cells and they'll die. And it'll so that in weird upfront, even military human terms, that's the idea. Like, we're not playing around like, oh, he's going to be all in a bad mood for a week. No, it's going to get to the point where the truth for humanity will be lethal, and we're halfway there. These are the terms. This is how it's broken down. This is how it's said, and it sounds like a friggin' fairy tale. Like, you mean all the lies are going to kill the goodness in people? It's like, no, we're just going to be too stupid to comprehend it, and we'll move out of a possible trajectory where this could be overturned. And it's not as bad as it sounds, because there's always people that have been there, but in that sense, that's also this kind of extraction from this time space, which seems then like the past. But then there comes the this boundary between this deception to try and get people to go into a virtual reality and claim it's the future or heaven or the new reality or immortality or whatever trade-off it is, when at the core they're basically energy harvesting. But then that concept is the core as well of this time system, this thing, because it's as if they filtered out so much information and they got so big that they energetically and informationally mutated the universe into a format that has nothing to do with the actual universe, to the point where we don't need a new bunch of pipes for the sewers and restore the water. I can't even form words right now, blah, 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 because all the infrastructure is going to break down. Wooden was actually one of the best moves, and now they can take, instead of repairing, this is going to save a lot, and instead of repairing the pipes, they get a smaller pipe that's made of a certain type of malleable material, shove it into the little pipes, put a crack, or the existing pipes, put a crack in the front, and then shove it in and high pressure, pressurize it, and it cracks the existing pipe, the old pipe, and then fills it in with a nice new fresh one. And if they didn't come up with that, nobody's going to do shit. Nobody's going to do anything, because you can't. How are you going to dig up billions upon billions of dollars worth of stuff over time? But then it's because they can get away with it, nobody sees it. But then the water infrastructure starts to break down. If that goes up fully, you get a pandemic. But anyway, that was just a side topic. But that's the idea, that whatever the goal is, it's gone so far beyond what we can conceive as the goal that we're going to have to get it without even realizing it's impossible, which is the paradox, but that's the point. And then it's with consciousness and the acceleration of what's holding us back energetically, what's controlling us to the point where we need 100% of our energy here and now, in this space, in this place now. And then what was the thing I said that I forgot? The soul... I probably have to rewind it to remember. It was the other thing I remembered, which that was the core of the time thing. That's like getting these, it's these understandings, memories, or the way to describe it now. Because then imagine there's civilizations that live outside of that whole system. They're like, we're not going in there. You got to get out. Like, no, we'll send a probe or a drone or whatever. Interesting choice of word, but or an AI, biological clone. But people are just, you don't tell people, they don't know. And I'm pretty sure we've been around for a while in terms of like these operations, and we've looked at time, and it's like the same stuff's been going on, and they've just been wiping minds. And so it's like, but the point is that could just be people doing it, and et cetera and so on. The other thing was what was it? The soul field. Oh, son of a darn. All right. It's